Thank you very much and welcome tonight. First, I'd like to recognize some of the local elected officials in attendance tonight. We are gracious and happy to have the Athens Mayor Weil. Thank you very much. And also in attendance, Jackson County Commissioner Jim Ripenhoff. There you go. Inside your packets, you'll find a blank 5x7 index card. In a few moments, you'll hear each of our panelists, including Attorney General Richard Cordray, briefly describe the work at the Attorney General's office. After the panelists speak, the floor will be open for questions. To submit a question, write it on the index card for us, please, and submit it to either Kelly, Kelly's in the back in the blue, thanks, or Karen, and Karen just stepped around the corner, but when she comes back, I'll have her wave. And here she comes. There's Karen, okay? So submit your questions to them, please. Now let me introduce the State Attorney General's office. The Attorney General is the Chief Law Enforcement Officer for the state of Ohio. The Attorney General's office protects Ohio families from predatory financial practices through the enforcement of authority in the areas of consumer protection, antitrust, charitable organizations fraud, and healthcare fraud. The Attorney General's office supports the important work of local law enforcement agencies by training officers at the Ohio Peace Officer Training Academy, where experts at the Bureau of Criminal Identification and Investigation analyze DNA, fingerprints, and other evidence. The Attorney General's office offers services to protect the most vulnerable citizens among us, including children, the elderly, victims of crime, and those who are preyed upon by greed in its many, many forms. Unfair, illegal, or shady business practices, criminal conduct, or the abuse of power and corruption. Now, let me introduce our panelists for this evening. First, I'd like to introduce Susan Shea. Susan Shea represents the Consumer Protection Section of the Ohio Attorney General's Office, and which protects consumers, small businesses, and nonprofits from unfair and deceptive practices in the marketplace. Consumer Protection conducts investigations, sues companies and people who violate the law, develops rules to protect consumers, and educates consumers and businesses about their rights and responsibilities. Susan Shea is the chief of the Consumer Protection Section in the Office of the Attorney General's Richard Cordray's office. Ms. Shea joined the office in August 2007 as chief of the Civil Rights Section. She also coordinates the office's efforts for Ohio's Save the Dream program, the state's multi-agency foreclosure prevention effort. In 2009, Ms. Shea was the recipient of the John C. and Ginny Ellen Pro Bono Award for her work on Save the Dream. The award recognizes and encourages exceptional pro bono legal work in the state of Ohio. Secondly, I'd like to introduce Jennifer Day from the Crime Victims and Prevention Division. The Attorney General's Crime Victims Assistance and Prevention Section offers services to aid victims and provide trainings for professionals who work with victims and crime prevention programs in Ohio communities. Victims of violent crime, such as rape, assault, murder, kidnapping, and domestic violence, face many setbacks as a result of their tragic and unexpected circumstances. Jennifer Day is the chief of the Crime Victims Assistance and Prevention Section in the Office of Attorney General Richard Cordray. Ms. Day joined the office in February 2009 after working as the Director of Revenue Management in the Ohio Treasurer of State's office for 8 years. She also spent 8 years in the Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office, where she became the Chief Assistant Prosecutor of the Family Law Division. This division prosecuted cases of abuse, neglect, and dependency of children, along with paternity and child support services. Dave. Finally, it is my great honor and privilege, and I am truly, truly humbled to introduce to you the State Attorney General, Richard Cordray, for the state of Ohio. I have told my students, yes, let's round the applause. And I have to tell you this little story. I have, for years, taught consumer behavior and have always told my students if they have a problem, you call the State Attorney General's Office of Consumer Fraud, not knowing there was really anybody there or that anybody really answered the phone. Until last week when, for the first time in my life, I had the opportunity and the honor to listen to Attorney General Cordray. And I was totally overwhelmed. I have come back, told all my students, he really does exist, and he is passionate about protecting consumers. So thank you for allowing me this opportunity. Richard Cordray was elected Ohio Attorney General in November of 2008. He previously served as Ohio Treasurer of State, Franklin County Treasurer, State Representative, and as Ohio's first Solicitor General. An accomplished lawyer, Cordray has argued multiple cases before the U.S. Supreme Court and taught constitutional law for 13 years at Ohio State University's law school. As Ohio Treasurer, Richard Cordray managed the state's investment portfolio of about $18 billion. His commitment to cutting costs, enhancing economic development, and promoting financial security among Ohioans earned national recognition in 2008, including the Excellence in Government Leadership Award from the Association of Government Accountants. He was also awarded NeighborWorks America's Government Service Award as the foremost national leader in state government for his work on foreclosure prevention. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you State Attorney General Richard Cordray.
Seemed like the sun came out toward the end of your remarks there. Got a little brighter in here. Thank you very much, Jane, and welcome everybody here. Before you get the wrong impression, I just want to ease your mind. If you call the Attorney General's office for help with a consumer problem, I will not be answering the phone. Someone far more able and accomplished than I will help you with your problem, and in many cases will help you see relief. And that's one of the things we wanted to talk to you about tonight. The purpose of tonight's forum and the reason that we are holding it is that we want to make sure that people around the state have a better understanding of the Attorney General's office, have a better understanding of what kind of information and resources that we can bring to bear to solve people's problems and to stand on your side when you have an issue of a great variety of issues that we deal with every day. So we started last year, and my folks talked to me, and they persuaded me that we would hold open houses in the parts of the state where we have branch offices, which is, at the moment, Cincinnati, Toledo, Cleveland, and Youngstown. So we did that, and I wasn't quite sure how those would go, but they were a great success. So we decided that we wanted to branch out and do community forums in other parts of the state, and one of the places that we selected was Athens, and we're glad to be here tonight. Because again, what we find is that although we have some great programs and services available to people, if they don't know about those and they don't take advantage of them, then we're not able to be as effective as we'd like to be in helping Ohioans improve their situation. So that's why we're here. And I thank you for coming. And if you will help us as you hear things tonight that you think are relevant to your friends and neighbors and people in the community or the groups that you work with, please help us take the message back to them and share the word, the ways in which we can be of service to them, and any of the information around the room, including information from my office and from our great partners who've joined us tonight. Take that information out and help spread the word about it. One of the hardest things in government is trying to reach, for us, approximately 11.5 million Ohioans so that they know that we are a resource for them and that their Attorney General represents not only state agencies and boards and commissions, but also in many ways individually the people of the state, which is what we want to do, what we strive to do every day. Tonight we're going to be highlighting in particular our consumer protection section, which in my mind is relevant to every one of the 11.5 million Ohioans, and also our crime victims assistance and prevention section, which may be relevant to many Ohioans depending on their circumstances, and if they happen to be a victim of crime, we're very relevant, but if they're concerned about public safety and other issues in their community, there's a lot of prevention work that we do and informational work, and both Susan from Consumer Protection and Jennifer from our crime victims group will speak to those issues. And then we'll open it up and we'll be happy to take questions or talk about anything you want to talk about. You can tell us what's on your mind, tell us things that you think we need to know that we can address in our office, and just have a general give and take. So that's our intention with the evening. I will just tell you that I have been the Attorney General for a little more than a year. I was elected, as Jane said, in November of 2008. That was an unusual situation because I was in a special election for Attorney General in the middle of the normal term. I'm up for election again this year, but the reason for that was one of my predecessors, my immediate elected predecessor, had to resign the office, and there was some scandal there, and it was a very unfortunate situation. So when I ran in that election, which was not very long ago, I made 3 promises. The first was that I would work to restore professionalism to the Office of Attorney General. I felt strongly and personally about that because I worked in the office myself 15 years ago. I was an assistant attorney general like my assistant attorneys general, and people who have worked in the Attorney General's office, and there's many people around the state who have spent time in that office, have a sense of pride about the work that is done, a sense of public service about what we do every day, and we felt that the office did not deserve to be held in disrepute because of misdeeds by a few. So we have worked hard over the last year to put the office back in order, to restore both stringent policies and enforcement of those policies, and to set an example, each of us, in the work we do every day. So I'm not going to talk about that. I think most of that work is behind us, and I'm glad to say that. Second, I promised that I would work, as I think the Attorney General should do and must do in this state, to assist local law enforcement around Ohio in helping to protect our neighborhoods and protect the public safety. In saying that, I feel strongly that I never try to masquerade or swagger around as though I'm the top cop for the state of Ohio. Some people think of the Attorney General that way. I think they misunderstand our role. In fact, Ohio constitutionally is a home rule law enforcement state, which to me means that the top cops in our community are our police, our sheriff's deputies, our prosecutors who really do fight crime on the front lines every day. And my office, our purpose is to provide support and help to them as best we can so that they can do their jobs better, but not to pretend that we do their jobs for them. And in fact, we do that every day. I oversee the Bureau of Criminal Identification and Investigation, which is sort of a state-level FBI, which has a broad set of resources and tools and personnel available to local law enforcement, including our investigations division, which actually goes out and works crimes and crime scenes alongside local law enforcement, executes warrants, actually deals with crime scenes, apprehends suspects, and then helps to investigate and apprehend those who committed crimes. We have our identification section, which does all the background checks that are legally required in the state of Ohio. Tens of thousands of those that have been a real proliferation of background checks in recent years for a lot of different positions, and we carry that out. We also run the Ohio Law Enforcement Gateway, which is a real-time access to information for law enforcement on the street so that if they have an encounter or they arrest a suspect, they can know immediately what there is to know about the suspect. And that's been a great tool. We had a meeting earlier with some law enforcement in this area, and it is commonplace for them to sing the praises of that technology, which we're constantly trying to improve and update. We also run the crime labs for the state. There are three crime labs around the state: in London, in Central Ohio, in Bowling Green in Northwestern Ohio, and in Richfield in Northeastern Ohio. And we do all kinds of DNA analysis, evidence analysis, fingerprints, blood samples, firearms analysis, you name it. We do it. And that's important resources for us to provide, because a lot of local law enforcement in smaller departments, smaller counties, smaller cities and villages, they don't have those resources themselves, and they really rely on us. So we work hard to help them do their best job every day. But finally, and maybe most near to my heart, and maybe this is because of my own background, I said that I would work hard to help us make progress on the financial security issues for Ohioans. Now, when I first said that in 2008, it was before the economy suffered its tremendous meltdown in the fall of the year. And I think, ironically, in many ways, that focus of mine became more resonant over the course of that campaign and remains very resonant today. But for me, that background comes from having served as the state's treasurer, and before that I was a county treasurer in Franklin County in Central Ohio. So I spent 6 years as a financial official, and I saw in that position, in those positions, how besieged many Ohioans were in terms of dealing with their financial issues. And it led us to beyond things like the normal treasurer things of investing our own portfolio and collecting property tax at the local level, to work on issues like financial literacy, where we really took the lead in recognizing that Ohioans needed to know more about how to make smart financial choices, both young and old. That led us to the legislature, where we helped, as part of a team of people, get legislation passed, which now becomes effective. It was phased in the summer of this year, where every high school student in the state of Ohio, before they can graduate, will have to have personal finance education in our high schools. Long overdue. Very important, and it actually puts Ohio in the forefront of the nation in terms of requiring that for our high school students. And we worked when I was state treasurer on how to implement that through teacher academies, training teachers to teach personal finance education, and working with districts and the State Board of Education and the Ohio Department of Education on how best to implement that mandate. We also, and this started when I was county treasurer, continued as state treasurer, and I'm sorry to say continues as attorney general, we worked very hard on foreclosure issues. We have a home foreclosure crisis in the state of Ohio, and it continues to unfold. I am very sad to say, it's just been a difficult thing for many communities in this state, virtually every community, that last year, for the 14th consecutive year, we had more foreclosure cases filed in Ohio than we had the year before. And for, it's been a number of years now, it's almost like the plague of the locusts in the Bible, 14-year problems. We have had a record number of foreclosures filed in the state of Ohio last year. That is difficult for communities. It is difficult because not only are there individuals and families and households losing their home, which is not only an economic problem, but it is a much deeper kind of problem for people. These are people who have somehow climbed the ladder of economic opportunity, gotten to the point where they have a piece of the American dream, they own their home, and now something has happened to knock them off the path, whether it's job loss or medical illness that costs them their insurance and builds up bills, or bankruptcy for a variety of reasons, or death or illness, injury in the family. All things people don't plan for, but things that happen. You always kind of hope it happens to somebody else, but it happens to people in our community. And also divorce can cause dislocations of that sort. Those people who lose their home, it's a difficult psychological setback for them. And it means ruined credit, and it means consequences down the road, dislocation, maybe changing school districts, all of those problems. For our communities as well, it means that, if you have 3 or 5 foreclosures in a neighborhood, it's going to affect property values of everyone. It's not just the person who got into some sort of bad mortgage or was sold a predatory loan, but everybody who has been faithfully keeping up with their payments and doing the right thing and had a sensible mortgage. Their property values are going to decline if there's foreclosures in the community. And especially in our urban areas, foreclosures lead to vacancies. Vacant homes lead to vandalism, lead to properties being stripped of plumbing and copper wiring and everything of value, electrical, and that becomes tear downs, or it becomes magnets for crime and drugs, vacant houses in the cities. So, and in the end, who's left to foot the bill for possibly tearing that down in the community? It's the local government, with nothing provided to cover those costs. So foreclosure is a very significant problem. We work on that problem in my office now, and Susan may talk about it as well as her consumer protection work, with the Save the Dream program, which is a way that we match people up to the great community resources we have in many parts of the state. We also have worked with the Ohio Supreme Court to bring mediation programs to foreclosure cases in our courts, which was not done until very recently, and we think there are many homes that are being saved that way, but we need to do much more. And we are working with the Save Our Homes coalitions, which we started in the state treasury, and we have continued to work with them around the state, and they do great work every day. These are foreclosure counselors, homeowner counselors, and they are community groups that have become, unfortunately, they'd rather not be expert in this area. They'd love to not have to handle foreclosure cases, but that's where we are at this point in time. And increasingly, we're looking to and getting some help. I'd like it to be much more from the federal government and the Making Home Affordable program, which has been a difficult program, has not gotten off the ground with great vigor, but they are working on it, they're tweaking it, they're pushing it. We had a meeting last week, the National Association of Attorneys General. We met in Washington. We had an opportunity to be with the President for an hour and talk to him about some of these types of issues, and they are continuing to try to find ways to help keep more people in their homes. But in Ohio, it has been a very difficult situation. But also, and I'll leave to Susan to talk directly about consumer protection, we work hard to support individual Ohioans in the marketplace when they're treated unfairly, and that's something we focus on every day. Finally, a final part of this sort of financial security basket of issues is what we call our Holding Wall Street Accountable project. And that's something that I have been very vigorous about as your Attorney General, and I think part of that comes from having been the Treasurer of State and seeing some of what I thought were misdeeds and misconduct on Wall Street, and how it has affected Ohioans, how it affected our pension systems and those portfolios, and how it affected individual Ohioans, their 401ks and their retirement monies. There are many people in the state who know now they're going to be working longer and harder before they will be able to retire because of what happened on Wall Street in 2008 and 2009. And I will just say that as Attorney General, I have a responsibility, if we believe that laws were violated, to pursue those people and seek redress to make it as right as we can for the people who were harmed. We have major lawsuits pending where we are lead national counsel against AIG, against Fannie Mae, against Freddie Mac, against Bank of America. We just resolved a lawsuit against Merrill Lynch. We just resolved a lawsuit against Marsh McLennan, one of the major insurance companies, all of which we believe violated securities laws in the way they handled their corporate accountings and their corporate finances and their shareholders. Just a quick summary of one of those cases, maybe to me the most glaring of them all, is our case right now pending against Bank of America and Merrill Lynch. This is on behalf of Ohio's pension systems, but also as a class action on behalf of all investors and retirees affected by Bank of America's falling share values in the market. In September of 2008, Bank of America announced that they were going to merge with Merrill Lynch. They had been wanting to do that for some time. They saw their opportunity as the markets were staggering. They announced that they were going to merge. It took them some period of time to put the merger together and get to the point of going to their shareholders and asking for their approval for the merger. So that was not until December of 2008. Our allegation in the lawsuit, and they deny it, but there's been a lot of congressional testimony over the past year, and it's getting harder to realistically deny this, is between September and December of 2008, Bank of America and Merrill Lynch became aware that there were much bigger toxic assets on the books of Merrill Lynch than they had realized at the outset. These were the bad investments and the mortgage-backed securities and collateralized debt obligations that were the stuff of which the financial crisis was made. It is alleged by us that they discovered and accumulated about $15.8 billion worth of bad assets on the books of Merrill Lynch. We feel they had an obligation at that point to disclose that fact to shareholders before they could make a reasonable judgment about whether that merger should go forward or not. We, in fact, believe that that is required by the federal securities laws. They have a duty to disclose that kind of material information. They thought about it, they talked about it, they strategized about it, they decided it would hurt their merger. They did not say anything to the public about that, and the merger went forward. Before the merger was finalized, there was one other issue that needed to be addressed. The Merrill Lynch executives, before the merger went forward, wanted to get their bonuses before the end of the year. Now, the nomenclature on Wall Street is new to me. I always thought that a bonus was special reward for especially good performance, sort of an exceptional thing that you deserved by putting in above and beyond. On Wall Street, it appears that a bonus is something you're entitled to every year in 6 or 7 figures, regardless of how you perform. Now, remember, these are the same executives that I said just had discovered that they had almost $16 billion worth of bad assets on their books, but they felt they were entitled to a bonus before these entities merged. We allege, and again, it will have to be proven in court, that as best we can tell, we think they paid out $3.8 billion worth in bonuses to the executives before the merger closed. Again, we think they had a duty to disclose that. They thought about it. They decided not to disclose it. No one knew it. The shareholders approved the merger, and things went forward from there. As that news came out and leaked out and became known in the marketplace, the share values sank significantly. The New York Times has described it as the single greatest destruction of shareholder wealth in the history of this country. That's the basis of our lawsuit, is we feel they violated the law in both respects. And it is my obligation, I believe, as Attorney General in that situation to represent our pension systems and all Ohioans, and in this case people across the country, to make sure that justice is done there and compensation is paid for the harm that was done. So that's all part of our Holding Wall Street Accountable project, part of our broader pursuit of financial security for Ohioans, and these are some of the things that we're doing in the office. So I will now yield. I'm going to pass the microphone to Susan. She'll talk about consumer protection. Jennifer will talk about crime victims, and then we'll open up and be happy to talk about anything you want to talk about. Thank you very much.
Well, good evening, everyone. First of all, we're about to finish up National Consumer Protection Week, and we've had over 50 events this week in which folks from the Attorney General's office and the partners around you have gone out and talked about consumer protection, talked about financial literacy, talked about making smart choices, and I really want to recognize our partners in the room who, without really them and us, we would not have been able to make National Consumer Protection Week a success. So if everyone could just give them a round of applause, really appreciate that.
And if we look tired, it's because we are.
Yeah. Yes. Well, first let me tell you a little bit about, I'm going to give you a little roadmap of what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to tell you first what we do in consumer protection, and then I want to talk to you about a great service that we offer, which is our complaint resolution process. Those are the folks, the telephones that have been alluded to, and I'm going to explain that to you. I also want to talk to you a little bit about Save the Dream, and we have some Save the Dream folks in the room that I want to particularly recognize. We have the folks from COAD in the room. They're one of the housing counseling agencies that participate in Save the Dream. We have Southeast Ohio Legal Services. They're one of the local legal aids, and they also participate in Save the Dream. And we also have ESOP, who participates in Save the Dream, and I believe they have a new office in Chillicothe, so I want to give a little throw out to them. Angela from ESOP is here. They have a new office in Chillicothe, and so there we go. Well, let me tell you a little bit about consumer protection. I won't bore you with all the details, and I won't recite the entire law. It's quite long. But if you purchase anything on the internet, if you purchased a coffee today, purchased a pizza, any of that, that's a consumer transaction. Purchased a car. We have a really broad range of consumer transactions that we cover, and my staff work to make sure that's a fair marketplace for both consumers and small businesses. We educate both consumers and businesses about both their rights and their obligations, because we believe that to make it a fair marketplace, it's better if we have a kind of a nice level playing field. Now, in terms of some of the complaints that we received, I also want to talk a little bit about that. Last year, we received over 30,000 complaints. It's the most number of complaints we've received. Actually, that's the highest number of complaints we've received. And I think that reflects the struggling economy and consumers who are struggling. That's a 20% increase from 2008. Our top area there was with respect to automobiles, and that covers a real wide range of different types of complaints. But also within the top 10 was mortgage-related complaints. As the AG spoke about, foreclosures continue to be, unfortunately, an issue in the state of Ohio. In Athens County, you folks have experienced about an 800% increase since 1995. It's a huge increase. And I know that it's something that we desperately want to address, and I want to talk to you about a great service that's offered a little bit later on with Save the Dream. But before I do that, I want to talk about our consumer complaint process. If you call our number, and our number is all over our blue folders, but if you pull out this packet, which is about speakoutohio.gov, it talks about and gives a number. It's the same number that's been in operation since the 70s, but it's a 1-800-282-0515 number. And if you call that number, you're going to be connected to a real live human being that's going to take your complaint. That complaint then gets referred to one of the complaint specialists in the Consumer Protection section. From that, what we do is we contact the business that's been complained about, and we work with either the consumer or small business or nonprofit that's making the complaint to see how we can resolve that. Through that process, we returned or saved over $2.8 million to consumers, small businesses, and nonprofits in 2009. And I also want to address a little bit about small businesses and nonprofits. When A.G. Cordray came into office, he really felt that the key to economic recovery was to strengthening small businesses. So we started a small business initiative. We started a pilot project in July of 2009. When we concluded that pilot project, we had over 500 complaints from small businesses and nonprofits. And with respect to even that small number of complaints, we were able to return or save $60,000 for small businesses and nonprofits. So what I want to do is I really want to encourage folks to file complaints, whether you're a small business or a nonprofit or a consumer. If you feel that you didn't get the deal that you deserved, maybe the deal that you were promised, received really shoddy service, maybe your roof didn't come out quite right, we encourage you folks to file consumer complaints by calling that number, or you can file a complaint on the web at speakoutohio.gov. So we really encourage folks to do that. The other reason I encourage folks to do that is a purely selfish one. We utilize those complaints to see what trends and practices are going on throughout the state to make decisions about who to sue, and basically the areas in which we want to make sure that we're addressing. So from those 30,000 complaints that we received, we actually filed 37 lawsuits in 2009. A majority of those lawsuits, a large part of those lawsuits, were foreclosure rescue scams. Now, if folks are familiar with them, these are the foreclosure folks who say they're going to promise you everything and then deliver nothing. So I do want to warn folks about foreclosure rescue scams, and there's actually information about foreclosure rescue scams in your packets. I encourage folks to look at the packets, look at all the literature on the partner tables, and we're glad to send those out to anyone that requests it. I now want to turn, as I'm speaking about foreclosure, to Save the Dream Ohio. Save the Dream Ohio, as the AG indicated, is a multi-agency effort. And there's a 1-800 hotline that was set up, and that number is also available in actually this great pamphlet, which is Having Trouble Making Your House Payment. Again, glad to send these anywhere. And it really talks about if you're a homeowner, you're having trouble making your house payment, who to call. And really, we encourage folks to call Save the Dream Ohio. We have referred over 24,000 homeowners to housing counselors and legal aids throughout the state, and because of that, we've seen some really nice successes. For instance, in year one, first year we were in operation, there were over 3,000 homes that were saved due to the work of the housing counselors. And even with respect to the legal aids, and these are in court foreclosure, almost 300 homes were saved as a result of that effort. So I encourage folks to seek help. When I'm speaking about homeowner resources, I always tell folks the first thing you have to do is actually take action and seek help. And so if you're working with homeowners who are in foreclosure, who are facing foreclosure, who are maybe in danger of maybe facing foreclosure, we always say take action, seek help, and seek help from Save the Dream Ohio. I just want to finish my comments tonight by repeating something, which is please file complaints with us. We really, really want to help you, first of all, and it really does help us help other people. If we can identify other trends, we can make sure that somebody else isn't scammed, and we can make sure that we take the appropriate action. So again, thank you, and again, because repetition is key, please file complaints with our office. Thank you.
And I'm going to switch gears on you. I'm going to talk about crime victims and what we do in the crime victim section of the office. So getting away from foreclosures and the scams for a while, but still really important in protecting people in the state of Ohio. And the crime victim section, we do two main functions. First of all, we're the administrators for the State Crime Victims Fund, and we also do a lot of trainings and education for law enforcement, victim advocates, and the public. With the compensation fund, we have about $12 million right now in the compensation fund, and it's not taxpayer money. That money comes from court costs from offenders, people who have been convicted of crimes. It comes from federal grants, and it comes from driver's license reinstatement fees. So there isn't any taxpayer money in that. To be eligible as a crime victim, you must be an adult or a child who has suffered what we call criminally injurious conduct. It means you have to have suffered or a threat of serious physical harm. It poses a threat of death or serious injury. And it's punishable by fine or imprisonment. So there are qualifications. We can pay up to a maximum of $50,000 per claim, and we're one of the higher states in the country that pays that amount of money. You have to qualify. We have a form that you can fill out. You can go online. You can call us. We will help you fill it out. You can also go to local victim advocates. You can go to law enforcement. So there's a lot of people, a lot of resources who will help you or connect you to us if you're a victim of crime, if you know somebody who's a victim of crime. And some of the costs that we pay from the fund are medical costs. If you've suffered injuries, we pay for therapist costs, counseling. We pay lost wages, and we also pay up to $750 for crime scene cleanup, evidence replacement. So we pay out a lot of things, attorney fees. In homicides, we'll pay up to $750 for burial costs. In addition to dependents of victims of homicide, we'll pay for dependents. And most of the claims, we receive about 8,000 claims a year. And most of the claims that we do pay out on are for assault or sexual abuse, sexual assault, domestic violence, and homicides. And with our education programs, we do a lot of training. We have a huge education department, and some of the things that you may not know that we train about is we train on missing children. We have the Missing Children's Clearinghouse. And what we do with that is we issue Amber Alerts. I'm sure you've all heard of Amber Alerts. But you may not know that we also issue Missing Children Alerts, which is for runaways. And we also issue Silver Alerts. And Silver Alerts are for people who are 65 years or older. And unfortunately, we issue 3 to 5 Silver Alerts every week. And it's usually for older citizens who suffer from dementia or Alzheimer's. So we issue those alerts. We work with local law enforcement to track people down. We also educate on identity theft. In addition to the education, we also have what's called a passport program. So if you're a victim of identity theft, contact our office, contact local law enforcement, file a police report, and they will take your picture, they will take a digital signature, and they'll send it to us. And what we issue is a card. It's about the size of a driver's license that you can carry with you. And what that does is it identifies you as a victim of identity theft. So if you run into any problems, if you run into any problems with law enforcement, people have been actually pulled over with an open warrant, and it was because of identity theft. And they were able to pull out this card saying, I've contacted the AG's office, I've contacted law enforcement, here's my proof that this really isn't me. We've had issues with people who wanted to rent apartments or even get credit that couldn't because of identity theft. So that's just a little bit of insurance for you. But we also have a lot of information in pamphlets. You may have some information in your packet. We also have a lot of information on our website about identity theft, which obviously is a growing crime. It's a frustrating crime. We also have what we call VINE, and that's Victim Information and Notification Every Day. And what that system is, it's an automated system that if you've been a victim of a crime, you can sign up with this automated service, and it tracks your offender. So if your offender has been, if they're incarcerated, it gets the status. You can dial in, you can find out how much longer they have to serve. If there's a transfer or any kind of change in status of an offender, it will automatically dial you at the phone number you put in to let you know that there's going to be a change in status. The offender may be moving from one location to another. So that's our VINE system. We also educate on triads, and triads are local law enforcement and seniors working together, joining forces and organizations. And we're going around the state right now encouraging triads, and we have a state triad conference coming up in April. That's in Hancock County. We do a lot of education on elder abuse. Again, we train advocates, we train law enforcement that showing up at a home where an elderly citizen lives and they're deceased, it may be passed off that they died from natural causes, and we try to educate people to look for signs of abuse, to look for this may be a homicide where it's been written off that it's an older person who has just died from natural causes. So we do a lot of education on that. We also chair the Elder Abuse Commission, the State Elder Abuse Commission, which meets monthly, and it's a group of people from around the state who come together and address the elder abuse issues that are facing us. Another thing we do is we educate schools on internet safety. And since the beginning of the year, we've probably spoken to about 30,000 children, school children, up through high school. And what we do is we train on cyberbullying, sexting. I don't know if any of you have heard of sexting. And we also talk to parents. We talk to school administrators. And the purpose is twofold. We're finding that while we do have instances where children will speak up and say, I had a 35-year-old send me an email the other day or pictures of himself, we're actually seeing that a lot of kids are bullying each other, that the abuse on the internet is really against each other and on cell phones. And so we do a lot of training, and I think what we're trying to do is just make them proper digital citizens. We want them to act responsibly. We want them not to mistreat each other. But we also want to educate parents. We want to make them aware that they should be watching what their children are doing online, on social networking, Facebook, MySpace. It's a concern out there that we not only want to teach children the right and wrong things to do and how to treat each other, but we want to educate the parents too, that they should be aware of it's a huge thing, and children we find are very educated on what's going on with social networking, much so more than their parents are. So we're reaching out to a lot of schools. And finally, we also educate on human trafficking, something that probably is getting more and more news around the state of Ohio. We chair the Human Trafficking Commission, which again is a statewide coalition to address. This is definitely a growing problem, but we're also offering trainings on human trafficking. And finally, in addition to our education, we also do conferences. And I just want to highlight a couple conferences that are coming up. We've got a 2-day conference called 2 Days in May, and that'll be in Columbus this year. And it's for law enforcement, victim advocates, and if the public chooses to come. And we talk during those 2 days. We bring in national speakers, and we talk about the current trends of victimization. And we also have training called Finding Words. And Finding Words is a week-long training for, again, law enforcement and victim advocates. And what that does is it teaches them how to talk to children who are going to be witnesses because victims of child abuse, how to address children, how to get them to talk about events. So it's a week-long intensive training on children witnesses and victimization. We also do elder abuse conferences for law enforcement, again, so they can identify signs of elder abuse where they may not have seen that before. And something that Attorney General Cordray started last year with the Board of Cosmetology, it's called Cut It Out. And what we did was partnered with them for salon professionals, thinking that salon professionals will have clients come, they may open up to them. You know, people tend to have a closer relationship when they're getting their hair cut or nails done or something. So we actually offer trainings around the state called Cut It Out for salon professionals to teach them about signs of abuse and how to talk to people. And that's been hugely successful. We're definitely going to continue that one. And finally, we have trainings called Basics. And that, again, is an intensive week-long training, and that's to help our victim advocates reach out to victim advocates and law enforcement to talk about child abuse, domestic violence, death notification, trauma. And so, again, we do a lot of trainings. But in closing, I would just like to add, similar to Susan, if you've been a victim of a crime, if you know somebody's been a victim of a crime, if you think somebody's been a victim of a crime, please contact our office. We also have an 800 number. It's in your packet. Please contact us. We will be happy to talk to you. We'll be happy to help you fill out forms, and we'd be happy to file an application for you to see if you qualify for our program under the law. So I would absolutely encourage anybody who has a question, contact us, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
It is suggested that you don't close old accounts. Length of credit, improved score. When researching my financial management class, information I found stated that unused accounts with available credit limits are viewed as a loan in that amount, possibly lowering your credit score. What should I teach?
Do you want me to start? Yeah. Okay. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Okay, good. Big voice. Well, are folks familiar with something called a FICO score? It was developed by a group called Fair Isaac, and they developed a FICO score. A number of things go into it. But if you close accounts, it can remove credit availability. It can actually lower your score, but then having too much credit availability can also lower your score. So it's kind of trying to find the right balance. I think when you're looking at credit, what you want to do is to make sure that if you're teaching this, is that, it's good to keep some lines of credit open, especially with a long credit history, because length of credit is also something that goes into that credit computation. It's just good, generally, though, in terms of your credit score. One of the biggest factors in terms of it is kind of your available balance. Like, so for instance, if you have limits and you're getting near your limit, that can really lower your score. So what we try to encourage folks to do is to keep their balances low, not to have too many credit cards, and obviously pay your credit cards online.
Yeah, it's not very satisfactory to ask a question and have the answer be it depends, but sometimes that is the right answer. It's not always easy to know how the three major credit agencies arrive at their calculations of what your credit score should be. But it is interesting. You would think that if you had credit cards and you wanted to try to improve your debt situation, you would close a number of them and winnow them down. Sometimes, as Susan said, depending on the credit history of those cards, you will not get credit. You might even get dinged for that because they'll feel like it doesn't show responsible management of credit, but maybe you got a windfall and that helped you pay things off. So it's a little bit opaque. One thing that we would urge you, though, strongly, and this is true of every Ohioan, is you should monitor your credit report regularly. Let me give you two good reasons why you would do that. And first of all, let me tell you, you have a right under federal law, new federal legislation, not so new, several years ago now. You have a right to get a free credit report from any of the three credit reporting agencies once a year, which means that you can go to one at one point in the year and another in another part of the year. I don't think you need to be obsessive about it, but it's probably worth trying to check your credit report once every 6 months. And if you do that and rotate among the credit companies, then you will be able to virtually always keep up with your credit report. Two reasons why you'd want to do that. Number one, they make mistakes. Okay, if your name is Barbara Anderson, there might be 20 Barbara Andersons in Athens County. And if they somehow get you confused with a Barbara Anderson who happens to be a deadbeat or have a bankruptcy or owe a lot of credit, then you will be your credit report will be bad when it shouldn't be. Okay, and the only way to know that, to protect yourself, is to check it and make sure that what's on there is accurate and that there aren't mistakes. If there are mistakes, you have a right to contact the company and get them corrected. If you don't do that, if you don't check it and it's wrong, every time you go to borrow money to buy a car on time or on a mortgage, or if you want to get a loan from a bank or any other kind of credit, your credit cards, the interest rates on those will be affected. They will be worse for you if they consider you a bad credit risk than if you're a good credit risk, and you want that report to be accurate. That's different from your credit score. I mean, the credit scores, as I said, that's a little bit of sort of magic and computation, and that's not really so germane. But the information in your credit report should be accurate. If there's things on there you don't recognize, then you want to challenge that. The other reason is if somebody has stolen your identity, if they've gotten hold of your Social Security number or your bank account information, and they use that to start to open up accounts in your name, that will be happening, and you won't necessarily know it. They won't have the bills sent to your home, but there will be credit out there being opened in your name. There'll be charges run up in your name, and the first time you'll find out about it is like my wife is a professor, a law professor. The dean of her law school, a pretty sophisticated person in our society, the dean of her law school found that his identity had been stolen and a lot of charges run up in his name when he went to get a mortgage on a house and he was denied. And he couldn't understand why he was denied. It was because someone had stolen his identity, racked up charges, his credit report was a mess. It wasn't him, it was someone else. But then it takes months and even years sometimes to get that straightened out and resolved. And in the meantime, by the way, you can apply to our passport program and make it clear to your creditors that you are not who they think you are and that they should be dealing with you on the same footing as before. But those are excellent reasons why it's worthwhile to check your credit report regularly and just make sure that things are as they should be and that you don't find that you have a problem unexpectedly down the road.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next question is kind of a two-pronged question. Could you please comment on progress towards shutting down payday lenders and also mortgage servicers who will not negotiate to avoid foreclosures?
Okay, this is an unpleasant issue, so I will take it on, and you can add anything, Susan. Two different issues. The first, the payday lending. This has been a very frustrating issue for many of us. In the legislature in 2008, after a prolonged struggle, well over a year of coalition that was people from all over the state, lots of groups came together fighting the payday lenders, trying to impose reasonable interest rate caps on payday lending. Magically, there was a breakthrough in the legislature, and legislation was enacted that imposed a 28% annual percentage rate interest rate cap on payday lending in Ohio. Now, the big impetus for that was it was shown, I think pretty much beyond dispute, that there were a lot of people who went to get a payday loan, which is a short-term loan, but there's fees and interest rates involved, that if you calculate it out, amounted to, if you can quite take this in, an annual percentage rate of interest of 391% on many of the payday loans. And if you went and got a payday loan, and that led to rolling it over into another payday loan and another payday loan, as was happened for a lot of people, they were in what was called the debt trap, then they're living their lives under a cloud of 391% interest. Well, you can't sustain that. That's terrible. And so legislation was passed that capped that rate at 28%. A lot of payday lenders threatened that they would leave the state if that happened. It happened. They then fought it by filing for a referendum, giving the people a chance to overturn that law. The people did not overturn that law, despite a campaign in which the payday lenders spent millions and the forces in favor of reform spent thousands. And that was the law of Ohio. Now, unfortunately, the law wasn't written as well as it should have been, and there were loopholes. Some payday lenders did leave the state. We have fewer payday lenders now than we had before the legislation passed. But some others attempted to reconstitute under some of the other Small Loan Act provisions in the law and to continue to operate in the state. The way they made up the ground, which was very creative, and I'll give them credit for craftiness, was that they are imposing lots of additional fees. And if there are people who are in that trap, they're still coming to them and they're still getting their business. One of the fees that we find really galling, and we're trying to see if we can resolve this short of legislation, but we also have legislation proposed that would close these loopholes, is you'll come and you'll go to get a loan from them, and they will give you a check. All right, but check doesn't quite do it for you. You need cash. So then they will offer to cash the check they just gave you for a fee, $25 fee. Now, a check cashing fee is typically something somebody charges you when you bring them a check, and they don't know for sure whether that check, who it was issued by. I mean, they know who it was issued by, but they don't know for sure there's funds there to clear those checks. My own view is they should never be able to charge a check cashing fee for a government check because they know where it's from. But it's legitimate for them to charge a fee for cashing someone's check. But when they just issued the check to you, they know if they have the funds or not. Why they need to charge to have you then cash their check and give you cash is simply to make up the dollars so that they can get back up to the high interest rate when you calculate it all in. We worked with Representative Foley to introduce legislation. I actually thought this would be easy in the legislature this year, or last year, because I thought the legislature would see this as a slap in the face, that after they had addressed this problem emphatically, the voters had reinforced what the legislature had done, that they wouldn't take kindly to people circumventing it. That hasn't been the experience. The legislature has been slow to act. They have not plugged these loopholes. The whole debate is being renewed and fought all over again. There are people who have legitimate concerns in the minority community that maybe payday lenders, or at least access to money, and if there's no other banking products, then maybe that's better than nothing. I don't happen to agree with that, but I understand it's a legitimate argument, and we have not been able to get the legislation passed to reaffirm what we thought was done. Very frustrating situation. That's where it stands at the moment. What was the other part of this? Oh, mortgage services. Yeah, okay. Twin villains here. Mortgage servicers, and I'll try not to make this my 1 hour exposition on the mortgage lending industry, but in essence, what happened in the early part of the decade, the last decade, was that after 9/11, the economy had troubles. Interest rates sank to historic levels. We were down to a Fed funds rate of 1.00%, which was historic during our lifetimes. And there was not a lot of places where investors could make much money or make much return on their investments. A lot of that money poured into the real estate markets because it was thought at the time real estate is a pretty safe investment because what? Housing values, property values always go up. How do we know they always go up? Well, because they have for the last 15, 20 years. You could look back at the Depression and know that that was not necessarily correct, but that was what people thought. A lot of money poured into real estate. There were a lot of exotic loan products that were put forward. A lot of bad underwriting, sloppy underwriting, a lot of bad loans were made. That's what's led to the foreclosure crisis, in my view. It's now reinforced by the fact we have a recession, which caused a lot of people not to be able to make their payments. But what happened was, with all this money pouring into real estate, the second piece of it was that real estate loans, mortgage loans, which used to be you'd go to your local savings and loan, your local community bank, you'd seek a mortgage, they'd probably say no, you'd go back and save some more money, you'd come back with a down payment, then they might eventually reluctantly say yes, and you get a mortgage, and they would hold your mortgage in their own portfolio. If a few years later you had a problem, you'd go back to them, you know them, they know you, they would work with you and try to make that loan work so you could stay in the home. If they saw that you were off the job for a while and they'd come back, they might take those months and put them on the back end of the mortgage, but they would try to work with you to keep you in the home. They did that because they had a stake in the community, they know the community, they know the people they're dealing with, they're trying to make their loans work. In that last decade, there was a lot of sophistication of the financial markets, and Wall Street brought a lot of this to us, which is why I resent so much what they have done. Some of it was that it became commonplace for people to make a mortgage to you, and these are not our community banks. They typically did not operate in this way, but money would come in through other sources, and brokers would offer the loans, and they were bad loans, and then once the loan was made and the transaction was closed, they would sell that loan in the secondary market. They don't own it anymore. They have no long-term stake in the success of that loan. As long as they could make the loan and then sell it, they were out of it. They had their money, they went on their merry way. That then was typically sold in the secondary market to others, people that you never knew or never dealt with and never had anything to do with. They might, on Wall Street, take a bunch of loans, put them together into packages of loans. They might then slice off different tranches of that, is what they called them, of different risk levels. Very sophisticated, very fancy. They thought they were spreading the risk. They really weren't spreading the risk at all. They were outsmarting themselves, and these are all the toxic assets that are now on people's books. As part of that change in the market, the servicing of the loans, that is, accepting the payments each month, dealing with people if they needed workouts, etc., that mostly got outsourced to new companies that sprang up to fill that demand. And these companies were not local community companies. They were national. They held national portfolios. My Mortgage might be just part of a long list of them. It's just numbers on a piece of paper, means nothing. They don't know the property. They don't know the community. And that was a good business the early part of the last decade, because before the foreclosure crisis, for the most part, all they had to do was take their mortgage payment, match it against the right account, collect their fee, and that was great. But when things went bad and a lot of mortgages began to falter because they were bad loans to begin with, and then the recession has made things worse, the servicers have been unable or unwilling to meet the need for working out these loans in a way that makes them work. And some of it is they're just not familiar with doing that. They've never done any hard work as servicers. They just did easy work. The other is that we're not sure they're really interested in doing that, because all that means staffing up and adding costs and cutting into their profit margins, and then actually figuring out how to do workouts, which they're not very good at doing. So they have been abysmal, in my view, in their performance. And this is what the HAMP program at the federal level is trying to work on. That program has found, and they're keeping score now, which helps us. But it's when the score is 25-0, it's not very reassuring. There have been very few loan workouts made by these folks, even under a lot of pressure, increasing pressure from the federal government. And we have, in Ohio, we have sued, I think we're the only Attorney General's office still, I think. Mm-hmm. We have sued 3 of the worst loan servicers, national loan servicers, operating in Ohio. There are about a dozen or 15 of them. We don't have the ability to sue them all, and it's a pretty poor way to proceed to just file a lawsuit, because it doesn't necessarily solve problems. It puts a little more pressure on them. But that's something that we continue to work on. It continues to be very frustrating for us. And we need Treasury to continue to apply pressure. They've talked now about actually imposing penalties on the worst performers. They've talked about enforcing write-downs of principal, although that hasn't really happened yet. But we're constantly pressing for more action there. But that is all part and parcel of the foreclosure crisis that continues to weigh down on our economy and our communities here in Ohio.